Well, I hope somebody joins me. At least I'm making the recording for those people that I know anyway can't join me. I'm going to share the main text of Sefer Daniel. Here we go. Share the screen. Here it is, share screen. Okay. All right, so last week we had just gotten up to where it had started, the Aramaic. And we have here in both verse Dalet and in verse Hey an example of what appears to be what we call Greek T, where it's written one way, it's pronounced a different way. It's not clear to us exactly what's going on with this. Everywhere else in Tanakh, where there's a Greek T, it's telling us to read it on two different levels. Sometimes we understand that one way is for Olam Hazeh and the other way is for Achrit Hayamim, for the end of days. Sometimes we understand that that even for today, but there are two different messages. There's the message the way you see it with your eyes, and there's the message the way you hear it with your ears. The low, you hear the same thing. Is it written with a vav? Is it written with an aleph? And we have cases where it's written with both. We have cases where it's written with one, but you're supposed to understand it belongs to him or not, right? Not lo lanu, for him, for us, or not for us. And there's a way of understanding it on both levels, even Bisman Hazeh. What appears to be Greek T in Sefer Daniel, and there's a lot of it, and it makes it a little hard sometimes if you're reading, like in a Mikro Gedolot or you're reading in the text, to figure out which one it is. So the way that Sfaria is indicating it, they're putting the rounded brackets around the way that it's written, but rounded brackets means don't read it that way. Square brackets means read it this way. So don't read it this way, do read it this way. If I just saw that, if I thought it was in Hebrew, la'avdecha, that would be fine. To your servants, that's exactly what it means. The Aramaic for la'avdecha properly is la'avdach. And so that's the way we read it, because at this point we've switched over from Hebrew to Aramaic. And the same thing here. Look, although here it's like reverse. Okay, so it's not consistent. Here it's like reverse. The more, I'm going to say more modern, the Aramaic of the Targum, the Aramaic of the Gemara Bavli, of the Agarata, would be the Kasdaya. That would mean to the casting. Hey, Miriam. So it would mean to the casting, and it would be great. Okay, this thing about la kasdaya. But in fact, it's pronounced la kasdae. Now, that's a different way of doing the plural, from kasdaim to kasdae. It sounds like the construct form that we have in Hebrew. So what we see a lot of is it written this way? Is it pronounced that way? There was a shift going on. There was a linguistic shift going on. And the Aramaic that Daniel had learned how to read and write was not written with the letters, the Hebrew letters. It was written in a syllabary where each syllable, kas, had its own symbol, da had its own symbol, etc. And he was taking, the way you pronounced it, the way you heard it, and he was transliterating it into Hebrew letters. And then the Anshe Knesset Hagdola took this sort of diary that Daniel had kept or had created, this memoir that Daniel had created, and they edited it somewhat and they put it into Tanakh. But there's still a period of shift in how things are pronounced. And is it Hebrew? Is it Aramaic? And it's back and forth. And so a lot of the Krieg that we see, I mean, I looked to see if there was, anything that any of the Mefarshim spoke about. And basically they did not. The only person that I found who spoke about it was Mr. Alan Smith, who lives up in Beit El. No, excuse me. He lives in Eli. He lives in the Shomron in Eli. And I showed you his book in the first session. And he said, what's going on with all this Krieg stuff? And his sense was that it was a problem with, that it was a problem with change in time. Possibly, that scribal errors had crept in and somebody was trying to fix them. Not clear at all what was going on. And so I should make this quiet. There we go. So I'm not going to speak about it again, but when there's a Krieg where we're really supposed to understand it the way we do in the rest of Tanakh, which is that it's written this way, but you're supposed to understand it this other way, I'll point those out. But the rest of the Krieg I'm going to ignore, because I think it's just an indication of a shift in the language, a shift in the way it was pronounced at one time to the way it was pronounced at another time, etc. Okay. Great. Miriam, I hope she keeps trying to come in and then it's not showing up. Not fair. All right. At any rate, so what happened in verse 4 was the costume spoke to the king in Aramaic, and initially it's a quote. Now, Daniel wasn't actually there. Okay. He is neither a Khartoum nor a Mechashef nor an Ashaf nor a Chasti. Okay. He's not any of those kinds of wise people. He is, albeit young, he is an advisor to the king. He's known to be gifted in terms of wisdom, and we were already told at the end of the first chapter that he actually has some skill in interpreting dreams, but he wasn't one of the people who was called to the king. So he's not there. So to some extent, he's quoting what he was told happened, whatever, to make us feel like we're right there alive in the story. Okay. And he quotes them. And once he switches into Aramaic, and this is something that Rav Steinsaltz points out in his commentary, once he switches into Aramaic, he was equally conversant in Lashon HaKodesh and in Aramaic. And so he just continued writing in Aramaic. All of the stories now, from here on out, the rest of all the story part of this will be written in Aramaic and not in Lashon HaKodesh. Then the next part of the Sefer, where he is describing his visions and his tefillot, etc., then he switches back to Lashon HaKodesh. But from here on out, we're in Aramaic. And it Malka la'almin chayeh. O king, live forever. Amar chalma la'avdach ufisha nachave. Tell over the dream to your servants, and we will. Nachave is like chavaya, nagid. We will tell, right? So just say what the dream is. Don't try to interpret it. No elaborations. And we're going to tell. We're going to get deeper into it. We'll be able to tell you what the solution to it is, what the meaning of it is. Anamalka Vamar, the king raised his voice and he said to the Kasta A, to these casting, Milton miniasta, the thing has left me. It's gone. Whoops. Hen la tahod unani chalmo fishre. Okay. Hen is like e or in later Aramaic. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, hadamin tit avdun, you're going to be made bloody. Okay, this is the itpa'el in Aramaic is passive and avad is asa. And so you're going to be made bloody. Ubatechen navale yitsamon. Your houses will be raised like the sin shin switch shamama. Okay. Vehen chelmo fishre tahachavon matnan vizba vikar sagi tikablun min kadamai. The im, the hen is always going to be im, and if the dream and its solution, you will tell me. So now that he's told them what's going to happen if they don't, so now he's coming back and telling them what's going to happen if they do. Okay. And what if they do tell it, what's going to be? They're going to get matana, okay, gifts. Un vizba, Jastrow suggested this is like language of lebazbez, of largesse, of giving greatly, freely, wildly, okay, and a great amount of kavod. Okay, you will receive from before me, milafanai. Lachen chalma ufishre hachavoni. Therefore, the dream and its solution you need to tell me. It's very clear. Tell me. If you don't tell me, that's the end of you. And if you do tell me, then you're going to become rich beyond your wildest dreams. Okay. The thing that's interesting is that normally this shorsh kuf bet lamed in Aramaic, in later Aramaic, always means to hear, lishmoa. And it can mean to obey, but in the sense that lishmoa can also mean to obey. But here, it's the kuf bet lamed of Hebrew. To receive. You're going to receive this from me. There's no way to understand that in terms of hearing. Okay. So, ano tinyanut va'amrin. They answered a second time, and they said, okay. So, tinyana, those people who know Breslov, the second book of Likutei Moran, the second volume of it is called the Tinyana. It's also the word in Arabic for tinyan is for instead of shnayim. So there's this taf shin switch, and this is just the word for second. So a second time, and they said, "Malka chalma yemar la'avdohi ufishrei nehachave." Okay. The dream should be said, or he should say, the king should say over the dream to his servants. This is the plural, right? His servants. And the solution, the pitaron, we will tell. So they're both just repeating their positions. It was suggested based on the Mefarshim that in this second time over, that they're trying to say to him, look, we understand that maybe you're trying to like test us or something else, but really we're not, we can interpret dreams. We can take a dream and we can figure out what it means about the future. All right. We talked about all these different kinds of soothsayers and fortune tellers and astronomers and whatever they are. But to read your unconscious and retrieve something that you yourself have forgotten. That's what you're telling us. We can't do it. If what you're trying to do is to test us, we promise that we will interpret the dream according to the principles and the secrets that we've received from our teachers from previous generations as to how we're supposed to do this. But we really can't do it if you don't give us at least the bare bones of what the dream itself was. That we can't do. We're not Nevi'im. Okay? That requires something that we can't do. Ana Malka Vamar, Min Yatziv Yada Ana Di Idna Antun Zavni. Okay, so the king raised his voice even more and he said, Min Yatziv Be'emet. Okay, think about at the end of Shema, and we say, Hashem Elokechem Emet V'Yatziv. Right, Yatziv is it can mean stable, but it has this sense of being. It's something which is planted firmly, absolutely. It's truth. Okay, Min Yatziv Yada Anadi Idna Antun Zavnin. I know that you, Antum, are buying time. You're just trying to buy time so that you can get together and everybody's going to give me the same solution and you're going to make something up and it's all going to be sheker. Kol kaver di chazetun di az de mini milta. This kol kaver, sometimes it's kol kavel dana, is going to show up over and over again. If you try to translate it, make it kol mikubal, kol kavul, that doesn't work. If you try to translate it for the kaval meaning having to do with lishma, it still doesn't work. This is actually a bitui. It's an expression in the Aramaic. It is not it's not able to be, literally translated the way you would translate kol and the way you would translate kavel. It means sort of like lu'umat. You're just trying to buy time, despite the fact what di chazitun di az de mini milta. You see that the thing has escaped me. The thing is gone. I can't tell you. You're still asking me to tell you. I'm telling you, you have to tell me what it is, because this thing that I dreamt has my heart racing, right? Tipa'im ruchi. I need to know what it is. It's clearly something that's very important for me and for my nation. And I have to know, you have to tell me. And and he's accusing them again of just trying to buy time. Di hen chelma tahoduni nani asher im hachalom atem lo todiuni. You don't make it known to me. If the dream you don't make known to me. Chadahi datchon umile kidva ushchita his dimintum. Memar kadamai aid. Okay, so let's stop and let's pull this first part apart here. Okay, we're in pasuk tat. Okay, and we took care of the first part, that if you don't make the dream known to me, so is he going to now repeat himself? We're just going back and forth, back and forth. No, he's already told them they're going to be made bloody. That he's going to raise their houses if they don't tell him. Now he's telling them what it is that he thinks about them. Okay. So this chadehi datchon, your dot, your idea about this is all one. And umila kidva, Now, what do we know? That the Dalet and the Zayin often switch. So if it were Kizva, Kozev, something which is false, which is, right, Kozev, deceitful, or that's Sheker, okay? And Shchita, as in the sense of, right, notice it's a taf, it's not a tet. Okay, it's not slaughter, but it's shchita as in nishchat or mushchat. It's something what his wow, even trying to pronounce it with the vowels, right? His demintun. You are preparing a false answer. You're just trying to buy time so that you can prepare this false and corrupt or perverted answer for me. L'meimar kadamai edidna yishtane. Okay. And you're intending to tell me something that, you're hoping that the time will pass, the time will keep going. And so, lechen chalma emruli ve'inda di pishre tehachavuni. But so therefore, he says to them, you need to tell me the dream now. I'm not giving you any more time. You need to tell me the dream now. And then inda, this is, I will know. There's that ayin. Okay. Interesting thought that perhaps yada came originally from a nun nofalet, or at least related to that. So he says, and I will know, by means of you're telling me the dream, I will know that then the solution you will also be able to tell me. Okay. So I'm trying to sort of race through, I'm going through the Aramaic. This part of it, there was very little of Kabbalistic stuff. There were different people. Part of how I'm translating it, I'll just tell you right now, part of how I'm translating it and the intonation and acting and whatever that I'm doing with it is based on either Malbim or Alshich or even Ramat Valley, who in this part is pretty much giving us pshat and giving us psychology, but not giving us anything extra beyond really what we see in the text so much. In another couple of psukim, but there's a very beautiful piece that several Rashi and others did, but we're going to read it out of the Chidah, because that I can bring Rashi up on the screen too, but the Chidah brings it more fully. And we're trying to get through this first part, which is this confrontation between all of these wise people, soothsayers, etc., and the king. And he's trying, and we don't know what the dream is. We don't know what the dream is either, because the king has forgotten the dream. He can't tell them what it is. Eventually, we know that Daniel is going to be able to tell them what the dream is. And he's going to be able to tell the king what the dream was, and he's going to be able to interpret it for him. And with that, we're going to get to the end of our chapter. And part of the other reason that I'm racing here is that the Maharal does an amazing amount with the dream itself and with Hanukkah. And so seeing as we're in Kislev, we're coming up to Hanukkah, I would really like to get through enough of this chapter that we can switch over and do the Maharal. But the Maharal is not on the entire chapter. The Maharal is just on the dream itself, just on the last little section. So we're moving apace here. And all right. And you're going to hear echoes anyway, right? Daniel, whom we know, we've already said, is Zera Melucha. He's from Yehuda, and echoes between Daniel and Yosef. Okay, so it's the Yehuda Yosef story is in the background with us all the way here also. And that's also something to sort of have in mind. Okay, so diving back into the psukim. No. Answering again, who is it? Again, Kasta'e, the Kasdim, Kadam Malka, before Lifnei Hamelech, before the king, Va'amrin, and they said, La itai enash al yabeshta di milat malka. There's no one, no human being, okay, in more modern Aramaic, it would be leka. La ika, leka. But here it's la itai, not, right? So, lo yesh, there is not. In Hebrew, it now becomes ein, but in Aramaic, it was lo yesh. A human being, al yabeshta, on the land, and in the entire world, right? Di milat malka yuchal hachavaya, that can tell the king the matter that the king wants. Like, to dive into somebody's unconscious and retrieve something the person has no conscious memory of. You don't even want a psychologist if they knew what psychologists were. What you want is a Navi. Like there's nobody here. We don't have Navi. We don't have, and here we're getting to what the Chidah is going to bring us, right? There were people like that in the world, but Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the Beit HaMikdash and killed them all off. There isn't anybody on the face of the earth who can do what the king wants. Kol kvel di kol melech rav v'shalit mila kidna la she'al kol chartom v'ashaf v'kasti. Okay, so as opposed to this, everything, the king is great and he's the ruler, but a matter like this, you can't ask of a chartom or an ashaf or a kasti, that whether it's a natural philosopher or a soothsayer or somebody who, reads tarot cards or casts bones or it reads the stars as an astrologer. I don't care how you understand which these different things, but they have no way of retrieving the dream. They know various rules about how to interpret dreams, but they can't retrieve the dream. And you're asking something that the kind of wise people that we are, we can't do it. Implication being that there is a kind of wise person who could do it, but it's not us. And they don't exist anymore. Unfortunately, we've wiped them out, right? So, Umilta dimaka sha'al yakira v'achan la ite di yechavina kadamaka. And the matter, hadavar, asher hamelach sho'er, kaved v'acherim lo ba'im, asher yagidu lifnei hamelach. This matter that the king is asking is very high and very heavy, really. And there is not anyone else who can come who will be able to tell the king what he wants to hear. Lahen elahen di midarhon im bisra la itohi. Lahen, therefore, let me just make sure that I don't mess up this. Okay. I looked this up before and I have to look it up again. This Elohen is right here. It's Elohim. There's a word that's spelled very much like this that means like Elu. I think there's one letter different. There's a little bit of vocalizations different, but anyway, Lachain Elohim, okay, who has Di Midarhon in Bisra La Itohi, okay, what you need is you need God, right? Okay. There's no dwelling. Asher midarhon im bisra la itohi. What you need is God, whose dwelling with flesh does not exist. In other words, God is what you need, right? Now, perhaps what you needed was a Navi, where God spoke to human beings who were in the flesh, and they were sort of an interface. But we don't have any of those anymore. And so what you're asking of us is not something that we can do. You're asking something that you need a God to do. And that's not among human beings. Okay. And so now now he's heard this. Now, I was trying to translate it just straight, but I was already giving some hints towards the way the Medrash understands it. And we're going to open it up. We're going to actually take a look at the Medrash as well. So now we have this phrase, Kol Kavel Danam, Lumatzot, Malka, Benas V'Ktsaf Sage. The king was Benas Nisisin is also a word for Rogus. He was very, very angry, right? Sage, Harbe, right? Ketzef is also a word for anger. So he was extraordinarily angry at them despite how reasonable they were trying to be. And so he got so angry, he just said, okay, destroy. Lahovda, like replace that hey with an aleph and you'll get the Hebrew, right, to cause destruction, to cause a total loss of all of the wise people of Babel. And actually then the next, we'll do the next verse also, and then I'll give you the chida. So Vedata, the law, halacha, nafkat, the law went out, right? Nafka is a word we know. So the law went forth, v'chachimei mitkatlin, uva'o Daniel v'chavrohi lihitkatla. And they wanted to kill Daniel and his friends also. They searched out, actually, V'o here is in search. They were searching out Daniel and his chevra to kill them also, because what happens? Now, let's listen to the Chida, whose parish is called Chomat Anach. So, and it's actually kind of nice because I'm going to go down here and I'm going to tell it to open it because that'll give me a wider piece of the screen. Okay. So the Chida's Perush, she says, it seems somewhat surprising about Nebuchadnezzar. My dato. What? He thinks that because these people aren't prophets, that they are deserving of death? I mean, they never expressed themselves or claimed to be prophets. And he was just told that you need a prophet for this, or you need somebody who essentially channels God's knowledge to human beings, and there aren't any. Okay, so why are you deciding to put all of these people to death? V'harei hu atzmo kasher Daniel higilo chalom v'pitron l'Daniel sagit u'mincha v'nichochin amar l'niskala shechashav la'ovdo avodat elokut. Okay, and later on, by the end of this chapter, when Daniel actually succeeds in telling him the dream, and also once he tells him the dream, also being able to interpret it for him, he bows down to Daniel and he offers gifts to Daniel, in not gifts, mincha in the sense of a regular gift, but he actually tries to sacrifice to Daniel. mincha, nichochin, right? And nisuch yayin, etc. Because he thought to make of this some sort of divine service, because he saw as though Daniel was like God in the flesh and blood, personified. Alma haya pela gadol be'enav ma'ol. And it wasn't something that he really actually expected, okay? Because it was pretty amazing in his eyes. And after Machar came, and given this, right, given that he recognized that he was asking something that was beyond human ability, okay, and he knows that he was asking something that's beyond human ability. Why did he want to kill all of the warriors, whoever, of Bavel? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense now. Okay. Lo Hamas Bakapam, that they weren't able to give him what he wanted. They didn't have the ability, but they were human. Like, and he recognized it needed divine intervention. So what was he upset about? And so I started to hint at it, because I can't not give away punchlines. That's just me. So the Chida says, "Amnam ra'iti l'Rashi." So I saw this in Rashi, Shehu Katab, and also in Midrash Rabbi Tanchuma. Okay, Va'achron and others. This not others. And he's explaining actually in the previous verse where it said Va'achron la itai di yachavenu. There isn't anyone else who can come, who can tell you. Okay. Because why? Achron lo itai, but because va'aharon la itai, kohen halovesh urim v'tuvim, because Aaron no longer exists to come. The kohen who was wearing the urim v'tumim, eino kan, he isn't here. She'agid lecha, that he can tell you, because the Jews had a way right, and the Urim V'Tumim were available for matters of national importance and for the king. And so, this is the sort of thing that a Jewish king would have brought to the Kohen Gadol, or God would have sent a Navi. And you're the king. You probably could have gotten them to ask this on your behalf to the Kohen Gadol with the Urim V'Tumim, but that doesn't exist anymore. Because why? Because the Beit HaMikdash has been destroyed. Okay. That he can tell you. Amar lehem, so he said to them, Kol kach haya koach ba'oto bayit, so great was the power that was in that house. V'natatem li etzel hachrivo, and you, the wise men of Bavel, Chachimai Bavel, okay, you gave me the advice to destroy it, to raise it to the ground. Miyad ka'as. That's why he became angry, even angrier than he had been before. V'tziva lahargam, to kill them. Ad kan lashon Rashi. Okay, ubaha necha, and with this, the whole thing makes sense. Okay, the afshar sheklar yadahu mizeh mikodem. This is now the Chida's own addendum to this. He says it's possible that he actually knew about this earlier. Okay, and that's why he was so angry from the very beginning. Shehigidlo, because somebody had told him, as Adam, achar chorban, after the destruction, vaya belibo, and so it was weighing on his heart. V'lachein techef betchila amar hadamin tid'avdum, right? Because at the very beginning he said to them, and if you can't do this, you're going to be made bloody, cut you into little pieces, destroy your houses, etc. He already said that. And the reason that he's really angry with them is not because they can't tell him something that he forgot, and he doesn't even know what it is that he forgot. But the reason that he's angry with them is because they gave him the advice to destroy the Beit HaMikdash, and most of the Nevi'im got killed also. And, Yirmiyahu ended up choosing to go down to Mitzrayim with the remainder of the Jews who went there. And by this time, Yechezkel has probably passed away also. And the next generation of Nevi'im have not yet been born. Zechariah and Chagai, Malachi, who will be the Nevi'im of the beginning of Bayit Sheni, and seeing to it that Bayit Sheni gets built. They're not yet around. They may not even be born yet. And so he doesn't realize that in Daniel, he had somebody who's capable of doing this. But, and so he didn't think to go ask Daniel, and it didn't occur to these various kinds of chachamim, the kasdim, etc. It didn't occur to them to suggest that, well, he has some Jewish advisors. Maybe one of them has this ability that the Jews seem to have. But he was very upset that they had, that these advisors of his had given him the advice to destroy the Beit HaMikdash. It's Chazal tell us that if only the nations would know to what extent Shefa in the world is dependent on the Beit HaMikdash, to what extent, bracha, etc., comes to the entire universe because of the tefillot that go through the Beit HaMikdash. Everybody in the world would have been standing there to protect the Beit HaMikdash, to not allow it to be destroyed. But they didn't realize what they had lost until it had already been destroyed. And that's what's going on here. Just like, who knew this was hidden away in this story? But this is the piece that's here. And so he says, and after that, when they said to him, what's that I don't want? When they said to him explicitly, then he revealed the secret that it was for this reason that they were chayav mita. Okay, once they also, explicitly said to him, there isn't anybody other than God who doesn't dwell with flesh and blood, right, anymore. So, and that's what you need, is to get the word of God to be able to bring this forth. So he's like, right, and that's why you're all dead. You're all goners. Okay. And the Chida went on, and he spoke a little bit about this. Basically, he had sort of the same Baruch Shekivanti, he had similar idea to what I had, was that so this rule went out, the law went out, data nafkan, and all of the wise men are all to be put to death. And so they searched out Daniel and his friends also to put them to death. And really and truly, that doesn't make sense. Had they asked Nebuchadnezzar, did he want to put Daniel and his friends to death? I mean, they weren't there. They were not among the people who said to the king, we don't know, tell us what it is, give us time. Like, they weren't part of that. So they weren't the ones who were there in front of the king. And they certainly weren't among the ones who had given the suggestion that the Beit HaMikdash should be destroyed. Because, first of all, at the time that it happened, depending on exactly how you see the timeline, at the time that either they were exiled, they were probably exiled before, but it's certainly not reasonable to think that Daniel and Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah would have recommended to the king that he should destroy the Beit HaMikdash. If anything, they would have recommended to the king that he should not destroy the Beit HaMikdash. So he didn't intend for them to be swept up in the decree, but this is something that we often see, and we say, when the mashchit is abroad, you need to duck for cover. Okay, when the king gives an order and he doesn't give detailed this one and this one and this one, but rather he says all of them, then the people who are implementing the order don't have the ability to make fine decisions. And they don't want to, especially if the king's angry, the last thing they want to do is go back to the king and say, did you mean this one too? Or, like that they're not going to do. So what's happening is now Daniel and his friends are about to be put to death. Also, this word bedain, sometimes it's just adain without the bet, means as. You can see the daled switch, okay? So there's the azai, okay? And what the bet and the nun are doing, I can't tell you. It's a linguistic shift, slight changes, different words, whatever. But anyway, bedain means azai or az. Daniel hativ eta utaim la'aryoch rav tabacha di malka di nafak l'katla l'chachimei baba. So then Daniel hativ heshiv, eta is etza, utaim, and a reason, right? La'aryoch rav tabachaya, excuse me, not tabachya, tabachaya. He's the head of the, so I saw somebody who said, this proves that the Rav Tabachim in the Yosef story, okay, was not the chief butcher, but rather was the chief executioner. Because it does not make sense that Arioch is the chief butcher of the king, right, to provide him with meat for the table, because it says, Dinafak l'katla l'chachimei bavel, that this Arioch, who's the Rav Tabachaya, was the one who had gone out to kill these wise men of Bavel. So they were searching for Daniel and his friends to sweep them up in it, and Daniel, right, the English expression is takes the bull by the horns, and he goes and he wants to speak with this Arioch, who's the head executioner. Ana v'amar la'Arioch. So he, now, if you think ane always means answer, then you have to think, well, wait a second, what was the question? There was no question. Arioch thinks he knows what he's supposed to do, which is to kill everybody. And that's who he is anyway, right? He's the chief executioner, so he's supposed to go out and kill everybody. So there's this sense of ana, of lifting up the voice. And he said, this is Daniel speaking to Arioch, Shalita dimalka alma data mehakzafa min kadamalka. So he says to him, the rule of the king over what is the law of what's wanted, what is this that the king wants? Okay, Edayin milta hoda Arioch l'Daniel. So then Arioch made the thing known to Daniel. In other words, Daniel hadn't been there at this assembly of people. He was not among the people who was called to the king or the early hours of the morning to find, to explain the dream and to recover the dream, etc. So he doesn't know. Now, whether he really doesn't know or whether he's using this as a way to open the conversation with Arioch is not clear. But at any rate, Arioch makes it known to Daniel. And so Daniel al uva min malka dizman yintan le ufisha lahachvaya lamalka. So Daniel then comes, al is our language for come, uva'a, and requested of the king that a certain amount of time should be given to him, and the solution would be, so that a solution would be told to the king. So Daniel says, I wasn't here, but I've heard that there's this thing going on, right? And he, again, whether he did know, whether he didn't know ahead of time, but now he's asking. The thing that's pretty amazing about this, right, is that he's asking the king the time should, right? Now, to what extent is this Hebrew, is this Aramaic? We're kind of going back and forth, because earlier we saw that the king said to the Kasdim, right, I know that Idana Antun Zavni, you're buying time. And here Idana is man. Okay. Whereas, which is very Aramaic and perfectly reasonable and nothing at all unusual about that. And yet when we get to this verse, when we get to verse Tet, that's Tet Zayin. When we get to Tet Zayin, we hear Daniel saying that he's specifically asking that time should be given to him. And Yintin, okay, that's more of the Aramaic pronunciation than Yinatain, which would be more the Hebrew pronunciation. To him, the time should be given to him, and then the solution is going to be told to the king. All right. Get started into this next chunk. Goes on for like another 5 psukim. So seeing as everybody's just going to be listening to it and we got started late, maybe I can give myself another 5 minutes. I don't know if I can do like 8 psukim in 5 minutes, but we'll see what we can get done here. So the first part was the confrontation. The next part was Daniel deciding to get involved and going to the king and asking for a little bit of time, which evidently he's given. Okay, now so here instead of Badain, we have Edain Az. Daniel Levaita Azal. He went to his Levite, to his house. He went to his house. Luchanani Mishel Vazaria Chavrohi Milta Hoda. He makes the matter known to his friends. Rachmin Limiv Min Kadam Ela Shmaya Al Raza Dana. And Rachmin, we've said earlier in various discussions that Rachmin is a word for Ava. So it's Lemive, to request, right? Levakesh Rachmin, from God of heaven, who is the God over this secret. Actually, over all secrets, right? That's one of our names for Kadosh Baruch Hu. Di la Yehov dun Daniel v'chavroi im sha'ar chachimei Bavel, in order that Daniel and his friends should not be utterly lost along with the rest of the wise men of Bavel. So he tells them about it, and he tells them they need to daven. Okay, they need to ask for loving kindness, Rachmim. Okay. Adain LeDaniel bechezva dilelia raza gali, excuse me. So then to Daniel in a vision of the night, the secret is revealed. Dain Daniel Berech Elah Shmaya. And so then Daniel gives a bracha. He gives thanks by means of a bracha to God of heaven. Okay, Shmaya. Anei Daniel Hamar. So in response to the fact that after telling his friends and davening, and then finally going to sleep and being given essentially a prophetic vision. So then he raises up his voice and he says, Levei Shmei Di Elokah Mevarach Min Alma V'ad Alma. Let the name of the Lord be blessed, Me'olam V'ad Olam, right? And you hear with slight changes, this is the basis for part of the Kaddish that we say. Okay? Di chachmata gvorta di lehi. Because all of chachma and all of gvura belong to God. They belong to Him. Not the fact I'm going to be able to do this, it's nothing about me, right? It's all from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'hu mehashnei idanaya uzimnaya hade malchin umahake malchin yehev chachmata lachachimin umanda'a liyade bina. And he, meaning God, okay, mehashnei idanaya. I don't even think this has anything Russian to it. But actually, I had something here that I wanted to use, and then I have something else to share about this also. But here, okay. Wait a second, but this is Kaf Aleph. So we're up here. Oops, I apologize. Okay, and he says, who, right? Mehashne. So we're used to the shin top switch going on, but it's not. Mehashne, he's Mishaneh Idnaya. Zimnaya. He makes time and the Zman and the seasons known, right? The Itim and the Zmanim known. Okay. Mehadna Malchin Umahakim Malchin. He causes kings to pass and he establishes new kings in their place. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who know Bina, Yodei Bina, right? He gives Chachma to the wise. And so that's as far as I'm going to go today. So I'm not going to quite finish this prayer of Daniel's. We'll pick that up next time. But I do want to share with you a couple of very sweet things on this verse about giving wisdom to the wise. So the Be'er Maim Chaim, this is a Hasidic source. The Be'er Maim Chaim says, the Chacham Makir Chesrono, a wise person, a truly wise person, recognizes that which he lacks. He knows that there's no limit to Chachma, that no matter how much he learns and how much he or she delves into something, that there's always more. Chachma is very close to Kadosh Baruch Hu, and it's Ein Sofi, and so there's always more. And so a truly wise person, and so a wise person, someone who wants to be wise. That's one of the reasons, by the way, why they're called Talmid Chacham, because they're always learning. It's not that they're chacham, asui, and finished and done. Okay, because the minute that they do that, then they fall prey to gaiva, and then they for sure have no chachma whatsoever, right? But that's not what the Ber Maim Chaim says. He says anyway. So therefore, they continue. They ask always, constantly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he should add more chachma to them, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu fulfills their request. But he calls it this Heskel, okay, who sees himself. So whether you read it as Sachar, as somebody who's like a fool, or whether you say, this is the intellectual academic kind of curiosity, as opposed to this deep desire for knowing and knowledge of the world and of God's truth, but whichever way you want to read it. So this person who sees himself, he sees himself already as being a great chacham. So therefore, there's no need for him to have any more chachma, right? Because he's, this is the full professor who everything has to fit his theory kind of person. And so he doesn't see any need for any additional chachma. And so he too, Hashem Yitbarach, fulfills his will and doesn't give him any more chachma. He doesn't give him chachma. Chachma is only given to those who recognize how much they desire chachma. And there are other pieces. There are a couple other pieces here as well. And with that, we're going to close. There's one person. This is from something called Kitvei Kodesh. And it says there's Chachma Ilah and there's Chachma Tata. In other words, there's a supernal kind of Chachma and there's a lower down kind of Chachma. Haba mi koach hanivraim, that comes from the power and the potential that's in created beings. Okay, Chachma Ilah masigim rak milamala, but the supernal kind of Chachma you can only grasp or achieve when it's brought down from above, right? This is Yahav Chachmata Chachimin, rather. And so the supernal kind of Chachma is only graspable if it's given from above, and it's only given to people who are called Chachimin. In other words, people who are on the level, let's say, of Moshe Rabbeinu Alav Shalom, Shana Anav Mikol Adam. And so the Kitvei HaKodesh also point out that the prerequisite to be a real Chacham, to be someone who's Chachim, right, is Anava. Sefer called Avat Shalom defines Chachimin as those who are mechinim atzman lihyot ksherim lekabel tachachma. Right. In other words, he's paying attention to that extra yud in there, and he's reading it as to cause chachma. And so to cause chachma, he's like almost a hifil kind of thing. And so he's saying, to cause chachma means to prepare to be able to receive it. And the Avogat Bosam says there's a difficulty here. Where did they become chachimin in the first place? In other words, if chachma is only given to those who are already chachimin, then the first time that chachma was to be given, there was nobody to receive it. Okay, so you've got a difficulty. Okay, so what are chachimin? Again, it's koachma. This is the way of turning around the letters of chachma to make it take the chet kaf and turn them around, koachma. Okay, and so the koachma is the komar le'elu shechoshvim atzman l'chinat ayin. And again, everybody, and this is why it was said earlier, right? Somebody who's the Bechina of Moshe Rabbeinu, who said, Ma nachnu, what are we? Ma. Okay. The koach of the ma is of the ability to say, I don't know anything, right? It's a Breslov story about Rabbi Nachman, is that he would finish teaching something over and then he would say, I know nothing. I know nothing. The minute I think that I know, I close off that aspect of I'm lacking. I don't know. If I don't know, Akash Baruch Hu, there's that vacuum. That not knowing means that I have an empty vessel that Akash Baruch Hu can fill. But the minute that I say I know, I've closed it off because now it's full. I need to empty it. I need to constantly be emptying it and saying, I don't know. I don't know. And because I don't know, then we're zocha to be able to have for Akash Baruch Hu to give us chachma of all sorts of different kinds. It doesn't have to be book learning or language learning or whatever it is. And the last person who had something to say on this verse was the Pardes Melech, and he says, what does it mean to give it to the chachimin? He says, Le'elu sheyesh lehem reshit chachma yirat Hashem. Those who understand that the beginning of knowledge, the prerequisite for knowledge, is to have yira. Okay, and so they not only have yira, they are also given this chachma ilah. So that uses up our time, and I thank you very much for watching the video, because there was nobody who successfully got on to join me today. Enjoy. Okay.